Halloween story number 2. I have had just too many strange occurrences happen on Halloween night to even enjoy it very much anymore. Trust me, you don't want to go to jail on Halloween night and have a mugshot taken of you dressed up like Raggedy Andy. It is extremely awkward to be standing in the middle of the street while your girlfriend dresses up as Dorothy screams at her scarecrow from Wizard of Oz. One Halloween, I dressed up like Lord Voldemort and made a little girl cry. Poor little thing just wanted some candy to go trick or treating, and I opened up my door and she screamed and just started wailing. I felt horrible. By my sophomore year in college, I was just sort of over dressing up and going to parties and getting drunk. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoy my pints. But I just don't really like going to certain parties. New Year's, 4th of July, Halloween. Fortunately, I had a friend named Fritz who felt the same way. His reasoning is a lot more personal than mine, which I won't go into. I want to say this Halloween landed on a Saturday night, and it was also daylight savings. This meant that there was an extra hour for students to party, and Fritz and I wanted to do with it. Cops would be swarming around, everybody would be drunk and hooking up on everybody else's couches and breaking things and making noise. You know, priorities. But Fritz and I didn't want to be the only losers sitting on our lonesome Halloween night while everybody else was having fun, so he and I got the wonderful idea to go on a night hike. This was one of her hobbies. Hiking, camping, fishing, we really liked that. But night hikes were our favorite. Fortunately, Fritz had a Jeep, so we could really go off out into the woods. And Humboldt County has a bunch of woods. You do not want to get lost out there. So, I have no idea why we decided to just go off somewhere random. I don't know why we decided to go off to some place we've never been before. I don't know why we didn't think to bring a map or something. Before I continue on with this story, I'm just going to have a bit of a soapbox moment here in a tiny lecture and just say, don't do that. Don't do what we did. It is, in my opinion, always best to know where you are going and to tell others where you intend to go. Anyway, we drive off onto the highway out in the woods, out into the darkness, away from civilization, and towards the unknown. After about 45 minutes of driving, Fritz pulls over to the side of the road and says, "This is as good of a place as any," shutting off his Jeep. I agreed with his sentiment, and I put on my coat, pulled out my flashlight from the side console, and donned my beanie cap. He grabbed a few water bottles and 2 beers, and off we went, off into the night. The forest was thick, dense, and only partially lit by the reddish hunter's moon above, which was crescent, if I recall correctly. That being said, you really could not see your hand in front of your face. And my flashlight wasn't the best. It was the early 2000s, and I was a broke college student. My flashlight could only give us a certain radius of light that maybe, at best, stretched out 10 feet, if that. I remember that the trail was really narrow, and you really had to look hard on the ground to keep on it. There were large, formidable redwood trees not 2 feet away from us in both directions. One wrong turn, and the next thing you know, you're in the thick of it. Literally. When it's that dark, and you're moving that carefully, you don't actually cover that much distance. And it's always best to track what time it is and how long you've been walking. The fact that we had been walking almost 2 hours off into the darkness in a creepy forest probably indicated that we weren't as far off as we thought we were. 2.5 hours into the walk, and there's a snap and a bump, bump, bump. Probably just a pine cone falling or something. "Dude," Fritz says as he looks at me, looks around, and continues to walk onward. "Yeah," I said, scanning my flashlight to and fro. "I don't know, there's no pine cones out here, dude." "It's the woods, dude," Fritz says. Okay, We continued with the ascent onward into the brush. Snap, bump, step, step, step. Deer, Fritz says. Yeah, I said, scanning my flashlight to and fro. I don't know about that, dude. It's the woods, dude, Fritz says. Okay. I got tired of leading with my flashlight, so I handed it off to Fritz and we changed places. He was in front of me, and I was behind him, making sure to stick close. About 15 minutes later, he stops dead in his tracks. Deer, Fritz says. Oh yeah? You sorta already said that and all, I asked him. So, where's this deer you speak of? He points my flashlight on the ground in front of us, and with his other arm he sticks out his index finger and points, right smack in there. There was a dead doe on the ground. A big one. Holy smokes, I said as we stepped closer to it, inspecting it. That thing is dead as all hell. Yeah, and fresh, Fritz said. How fresh? I asked. Fritz was inspecting it with my flashlight. He said, there's still color in its eye. It doesn't smell like decomposition. It was a grisly thing to look at. Imagine, if you will, that somebody had taken a really sharp metal rake and just dragged it along the lines of its side, along its shoulders and its legs and its joints and whatnot. Like, as if something was having a field day with its ribs with a big old metal rake. Just nasty looking, really. I said something like, I don't like this at all, Fritz. Dude, look at this. Fritz said, bending down, getting really close to the sucker. This thing has been mauled. Bear? I asked. Nah, man, Fritz was wheeling in his brain. No, man, bears don't do things like this. This ain't no bear. Explain. Why is it not eaten? Why is it left here in the middle of the path? Hunters? I asked. I refer you to my previous statement, Fritz countered. Do you know any hunter that would maul a deer with his finger claws and just leave it in the middle of the trail? I don't like this one bit, Fritz. This thing was killed for no observable reason. Out of nervousness, I tried to joke it off by saying something like, it's just the woods, my dude. Fritz didn't find that very funny. Fritz don't mess around. There's a sort of a theory that people change once the night falls. In the dark hours, we become slightly different people. Had this happened in daylight, I don't know how this would have turned out, and I ponder upon it quite often. Why we chose to just shrug it off and continue onward is beyond me. The answer to that is as vague as this night was. Break, snap, step, step, step. Somebody is messing with us, I whisper screamed. Hey, happy Halloween, yo. Fritz nervously laughed. Fritz don't mess around. His jokes are few and far between. What? I asked. All I'm saying is that it's Halloween night, it's dark, we are in the middle of the woods, and there's a good to fair chance that it's easy to get spooked, okay? Okay, I said. So, we kept walking and stepping and shrugging off the nervousness through the shrubbery. 45 minutes later, we reached the top of this peak, and down below it is this long, beautiful meadow. I would say it was about the size of a football field. It's hard to tell, because it was so dark. However, it was also so open that what little moonlight was apparent just lit up this gorgeous pasture. It truly was mind-blowingly awesome. Fritz and I enjoyed a smoke, sitting down on a big rocky part of the peak. We were puffing away at our cigarettes. Me, Lucky Strikes Unfiltered, him, Camels. We clunked our beers in a toast. Miller's, if I can remember correctly. Nice, right? Fritz exhaled, and I could see smoke billowing out of his mouth, like he was an ancient dragon of some sort. Stars as far as the eye can see. It was truly beautiful. Being under a big bowl of starlight, stars shine. This is amazing, I said. Next thing we know, two big bright lights were thrust upon the meadow. It's as if somebody took, or more like, two people took two big laser pointers, one being slime green and the other one being a really strange orangish color, and just started circling them around in a really strange fashion, and it began at the end of the meadow closest to us and started leaping away from us until it got to the end of the meadow further away from us, and then they went up into the hill rise, into the tree line on the other side. Then they went into the sky. And like any light, the sky would have killed it, but no, the lights were as strong in the sky as they were on the field. Whoa, I said. Yeah, Fritz said, standing up quickly. Big freaking whoa, emphasis on the whoa, duck. What was that? I asked. I don't know, bro, Fritz said, spinning around, looking about. I have no idea what that was. I told you, dude, somebody's messing with us. I whisper-screamed. Shoo, Fritz put his index finger to his mouth and shushed me harshly. Do you hear that? What happened next is still not a thing that I could ever properly describe, even to this day. Whatever it was that ran across the meadow, it was eerily fast. Jesse Owens or Mary Decker don't get shit on this thing. It was a creature of some sort, blacker than the blackest of nights. As if all the darkness had been consumed by this thing and managed to make it darker than the night itself. If I were to guesstimate, it would be about 9 feet tall. It was a strange-looking thing with backward legs, like an ostrich, like a big-ish bird. And friggin' fast. Take into account, please, it was moving so fast that all the details were hard to pick up. Its arms were so long that it went down to where the proper knees should be. Then, the hands were, well, they were the scariest part. They weren't even proper hands, they were, like, long claws. They weren't fingers, they were, like, these really scary, long claws. They were so long, it was as if they almost sunk all the way down to the ground. It was as if these claws were the biggest, longest part of the body. That was freaky within its very own self. The head was like a xenomorph from the movie Alien. Elongated, cone-shaped, and it dripped down from behind it. It was crouched. It was silent. It was moving so quickly it was hard to even get a good gauge on it. And I know I'm being repetitious, but this thing was so fast. It was the fastest thing I've ever seen in my life. To clear a football field in about 10 seconds is just an insane thought to me. I think I was swearing under my breath, "The Lord is my shepherd," but I'm not so sure. It might have just been in my head. The reason I say that is because I also remember there being a profound silence between Fritz and me. Terror is something that will actually slow time down. Or perhaps it's better to say that it manipulates it in a strange way. I don't know how long Fritz and I just sat there staring off into the meadow in quietude. In solitude between us. Did you see that? Fritz asked after maybe what was 5 minutes, 1 minute, 20 seconds, I don't know. Yeah, I saw that, I said, standing up from the rocks now. Fritz said, What was that? Bigfoot? Bigfoot's a monkey, that weren't no monkey. Chupacabra, then? Stop messing around, dude, what was that? I don't know, Fritz, I yelled. A messed up flamingo? You know that wasn't a bird. I was raised Catholic, and there are parts of the Catholic Church that I just don't believe in. I don't practice anymore, but I do have beliefs. When I say this, please understand that I do believe in evolution and I am pro-choice. But I do believe in angels and I believe in demons and whatnot. I think that was a demon, I said. I don't like this one bit, Rick. Fritz was saying, all frantic-like. Well, you tell me what it was then, I don't know, Rick. We need to leave, I proposed to him. Leave? You saw that thing. You saw how fast it was. That thing will catch us. No problem at all. So, we should just stay here? Like sitting ducks? Okay, Fritz said, his reasoning coming back to him. Fritz, I started. Did you put LSD in our water bottles or something? Fritz stared at me up and down with stoic composure. Seriously, dude? Okay, I agreed. Fritz don't mess around. That's when it got cold. Super cold. Super duper cold. Almost like it was freezing. I could see our breath. Billowing mist escaping from our mouths. At first, I thought we were both still smoking cigarettes. Nope. We gotta go, Fritz concluded. Agreed, I said. Give me new batteries to put in the flashlight, Fritz said as he was knocking at it and banging on it. It's not working. What? My heart sunk into my feet. I don't have any more batteries. What are you talking about? You think I carry batteries on me in my pocket at all times or something? Okay, Fritz sighed, staring down at the rocky floor beneath us. Wheels turning inside of his head. At this point, all you and I are doing is just arguing. This serves no purpose. Let's just go. Agreed, I said. So we descended into the rocky, dark, scary floor of the forest beneath us. Completely blind snap, bump, step. Oh crap, we both sort of said to each other. Haul ass, Fritz now whisper screamed at me. Yeah, I agreed with him. No shit, bro. And we just ran like wild foxes into the silence of the cold night. Running from something we did not. Actually, sort of a miracle that we didn't get lost. Perhaps the adrenaline kicked in such an efficient way that we just knew how to get down to the bottom of the mountain. We stopped only twice to catch our breath. The cold mist stopped billowing out of our breath, out of our mouths. What was that? I asked Fritz for just a brief moment. Shut up and just go. He said. Break, snap, step. Yep, run. We made it safely to the Jeep. Unencumbered. The silence between us. Stoic composure. We've not spoken a word between us on the riddling drive back homeward. Fritz pulled into my apartment complex parking lot. He turned his Jeep off. He looked at me in all seriousness. Dude, can I crash at your place? I don't want to go home. Yeah, bro, I said. Yeah, I get you. Inside my apartment was a massive party my roommate had. Obviously, he had a thrasher. Women and men just laying on the floor dressed up like Thing 1 and Thing 2. I found Waldo in the bathroom. Batman, the Joker making out in the closet. Someone had drawn Jessica Rabbit up onto the couch and drew penises all over her forehead. She wasn't a bad girl, she was just drawn that way. Never fall asleep with shoes on. High heels or not. There was cocaine on the kitchen counter, graffiti on the walls, there was a keg in the living room. My living room, mind you. I should have stuck around for the party instead of trudging off into the woods. Dawn was breaking, and a few partygoers were still awake. A girl sat next to me on the couch as I stared off into the blurred-out party noise. "Want some beer?" she asked me, offering me one of those plastic red cups. "Yeah," I concluded. "I could use a drink. You got anything stronger?" "We can go upstairs," she said. "Nah," I sighed. "I'm sorry, I'm not in the mood." "What's with you?" she asked. "Yeah," I agreed with him. "No shit, bro." And we just ran like wild foxes into the silence of the cold night, running from something we did not. Actually, sort of a miracle that we didn't get lost. Perhaps the adrenaline kicked in such an efficient way that we just knew how to get down to the bottom of the mountain. We stopped only twice to catch our breath. The cold mist stopped billowing out of our breath, out of our mouths. What was that? I asked Fritz for just a brief moment. "Shut up and just go," he said. "Break, snap, step, step, step. Yep, run." We made it safely to the Jeep, unencumbered. The silence between us. Stoic composure. We've not spoken a word between us on the riddling drive back homeward. Fritz pulled into my apartment complex parking lot. He turned his Jeep off. He looked at me in all seriousness. "Dude, can I crash at your place? I don't want to go home." "Yeah, bro," I said. "Yeah, I get you." Inside my apartment was a massive party my roommate had. Obviously, he had a thrasher. Women and men just laying on the floor dressed up like Thing 1 and Thing 2. I found Waldo in the bathroom. Batman, the Joker making out in the closet. Someone had drawn Jessica Rabbit up onto the couch and drew penises all over her forehead. She wasn't a bad girl, she was just drawn that way. Never fall asleep with shoes on, high heels or not. There was cocaine on the kitchen counter, graffiti on the walls. There was a keg in the living room. My living room, mind you. I should have stuck around for the party instead of trudging off into the woods. Dawn was breaking, and a few partygoers were still awake. A girl sat next to me on the couch as I stared off into the blurred-out party noise. "Want some beer?" she asked me, offering me one of those plastic red cups. "Yeah," I concluded. "I could use a drink. You got anything stronger?" "We can go upstairs," she said. "Nah," I sighed. "I'm sorry, I'm not in the mood." "What's with you?" she asked. "Listen," I said. "This is my house. That's my keg in the middle of the living room. I can kick all you motherfuckers out. I won't feel bad about it. Just give me a moment." She left me sitting there on the couch. That's understandable. I wouldn't want to talk to me either. Once all of the partygoers had finally left, I went up to my bedroom, kicked Freddy Krueger off of my bed, and told him to go home. And I slept for 12 hours straight. Fritz and I hang out quite often, but we don't talk about that incident very much. When we do, it's sweet, short, and concise. It's to the point. The night hikes ended right there and then. Forever. He's back down in San Diego now, and I'm in Wisconsin, but we do talk often. And whenever we do discuss it, it always comes back to the same question. What happened? The deer? The steps? The light? The thing? I mean, really, folks, what was that? What happened? The deer? The steps? The light? The thing? I mean, really, folks, what was that? Halloween costumes. When I was 12, I was really into the Halloween spirit. It was back in 2010, so by now I'm 18 and in college, and looking back I remember one of the scariest situations that the younger me got into. I lived in a semi-nice neighborhood in New Hampshire. If you know New Hampshire, there's not a lot going on here. It is mostly woods and close-knit communities. Remember that I knew everyone on my street. All the kids and their parents knew each other, and no one I know has ever admitted to being what I call the ghoul. I know, not a very interesting name, but scary nonetheless when you hear what I have to say. It was a Halloween night like any other year of my life. I was getting ready to go out with friends and do some trick or treating. My mom and I religiously watched scary movies like Halloween or Friday the 13th. I was that kid whose mom let watch and play a lot of R-rated games and movies. We just got finished watching the original Halloween, and my mom went down the stairs to the basement to quickly do some laundry so that I would have something comfy to wear under my costume. I was Master Chief that year. So she was in the basement, and I sat around eating some of the candy that was meant for the other kids coming to our house. My brother, who is 3 years older than me, was out with his girlfriend at the time, and it was earlier in the day, about 7 p.m. if I remember correctly. Keep in mind, this was the scariest thing that has happened to me in my youth. I've seen scarier these days, but I can talk about my addiction to abandoned buildings in another story. As I sat at my dinner table munching on candy and watching a Minecraft YouTube video, I got up to get a drink from my fridge. That's when I saw a man at my door, dressed in a ghoulish-like green mask, staring in at me. The freakiest part is that I have no idea how long he had been looking through the glass on the door. I didn't hesitate to run, and to this day, that's gotten me through a lot of things that could have ended differently. The stupidest thing I did that day was go downstairs and not tell my mom, who was folding laundry, that there was a strange man looking through the door in our garage. The way in our house is one door into the garage and one that goes into the house from the garage. He was looking from in the garage. So somehow, he got through a locked door into the garage and decided to stand in there and stare at a little kid. I was just too shocked and scared to tell my mom, and later that night, when I finally went back upstairs, there was no one there. Another creepy detail is that when I left to go trick or treating with my friends, the door from the garage to the outside was still locked. So, how did he get in? And why did he relock the door when leaving if he did get in through it? It was just all in all freaky and weird. I really felt like my whole house was safe, like anyone could get in. I recently asked all my friends, their parents, my parents, and my brother if they pulled a prank on me by doing this. We're all way older now, so no one would lie, and whoever did it, if they knew me, would have told me or my parents by now, since it traumatized me. My mom went around my neighborhood and asked everyone we knew. No one admitted to it, no one at all. I just hate the image burned into my brain of this disgusting mask, with black eye holes, into someone who is just sinister. I knew when I saw him there was no goodwill and fun in this man, or who I like to call the ghoul. P.S. I've told this story to all my friends since it happened. If you asked any of them, they'd tell you I've been telling my campfire story of this man for 6 years solid. Halloween story number 3. How old is too old to trick or treat, I ask you? Well, according to me and my friends, sophomores in high school figured that maybe we had one more good year of it. Some of our costumes were dope. I was Alex from A Clockwork Orange. Brandon was an escaped convict. He had the orange jumpsuit and the numbers printed on the back. with authentic handcuffs swinging in one hand. Tristan was this wizard of some sort. He had this long red robe and a really badass wooden staff that was all twisted and swirly. Tristan also had a legitimate beard that no kid his age should actually have. He dyed his hair and his beard white and, man, he looked old. Dustin had my favorite costume. He was a ghetto Santa Claus. He had red pants and boots, but he was wearing a wife beater, and his Santa hat was all greasy and nasty looking. His fake beard was adorned with cigarette butts and torn up lottery tickets. It was hysterical. Andy and Brian were a disappointment, as they didn't wear any costumes at all, which was a savage insult because they wanted to tag along and didn't even put in the effort to dress up. Brian at least had the excuse of being too old, since he was a senior and he didn't want candy. He just wanted to come with us. As far as Andy, well, Andy just kind of sucks. Halloween night came, and since Brian and Brandon's parents were going to a party early in the evening, we all met at their house, raided their parents' liquor cabinet, and got good and proper drunk. Andy reminded us that that wasn't a good idea and that we shouldn't be getting intoxicated. We all told him to just shut up. Dustin took a whole bottle of whiskey with him to make an addition to his ghetto Santa costume. We took our pillowcases, loaded up our cigarettes, smoked a bowl, and began our adventure. The night was met with many obstacles, giving us forewarning that we youngsters should have heeded. Many of the doors we knocked on were met with, "Aren't you kids a bit too old? And do your parents know you're walking around with a bottle of whiskey?" Dustin would just say, "The bottle's real, but the drink inside is apple juice, sir." There's this really creepy abandoned building that served as a juvenile delinquency reformation that got shut down due to asbestos. It's so old and nobody knows all the truths or lies or rumors that surround it, but the word on the street was that people had died there, were murdered there, went insane there, the works. "We shouldn't go in there, guys," Andy said. "Just shut up, Andy," we all said in unison. We of course broke in and looked around and found nothing but graffiti and empty beer bottles. I know, break into a building condemned for asbestos? I know, dumb. Leaving the building after getting bored and disappointed, there were these owls flying overhead and they rested on some tree branches and peered down on us knowingly. It gave us the creeps. Then we saw a few bats mixing with the night sky and thought this Halloween was just so friggin' perfect. We decided to continue on our candy crusade and went down the hill from the abandoned building and back into town. Out of nowhere, this massive Irish wolfhound jumped out of nowhere as we passed along a house. The only thing that stopped it from mauling me was the fence, the leash it was tied to, and the owner screaming at it from her porch. This gargantuan dog meant business. Snarling, drooling, growling. I mean, I know I was drunk, but that sort of sobered me up right quick. This beast looked as if it wanted to kill me. Me seriously, all y'alls. I was just walking by, and this creature targeted me out of a group of 6. It sucked. "We should just go back to the house, guys," Andy whined. We were getting really annoyed really fast with his complaints. After hitting up a few houses for more Hershey's and whatnot, it became clear that Ghetto Santa hadn't just been nursing the whiskey bottle, but that he'd been full-on surgical with it, and apparently not sharing much of it, greedy bastard. He got the brilliant idea to smash some pumpkins. Finding the nicest one, with the most effort put into it, he snatched it, yelled out, "Merry Christmas, bitches," and pummeled it onto the concrete as the rest of us scurried off in front of him. Andy was running ahead of us, angry and almost crying. "We shouldn't have done that, guys." The wizard slugged him hard on the shoulder. We then hit up a few more houses along the street, our pillowcases now halfway full. a car comes barreling down the street, fast as all hell. It screeches as it approaches us, coming to a sudden stop. "Hey, you smashed my pumpkin?" the big angry driver man asked. "Nah, man," a wasted Dustin stuttered. It was this guy in a Clockwork Orange costume. Realizing what he had just said, he looked at me wide-eyed, correcting himself, saying, "Not that Clockwork Orange, another Clockwork Orange, it's a popular costume, dude." The angry driver man sped off yelling, "You better be right, Kris Kringle, or I'm coming back and I'm gonna run all you punks over." Actually, it was kind of funny, because as we continued on into the night to hit up more houses, sure enough, like clockwork, a dude in a Clockwork Orange costume walked against us with his homies, yelling in a sputter of ire, "I didn't smash no pumpkins, man." That old man was whack. The group of us tried to maintain stoic composure. It was almost impossible to bottle the laughter. "I told you guys," Andy said. This time I chimed in, "Andy, if you don't shut your mouth, I'm going to tell your mother that all of this was your idea." That seemed to shut him up. A few blocks later, Ghetto Santa cries out, "Santa's out of booze, children." That's when a response came out from the darkness on a hill above. "Who wants to party?" In unison, the gang says, "We do." "Come on up," is the response. Expecting Andy to start lecturing us, he instead said nothing. So we climbed up the hill into the backyard of a big house where a huge Halloween party was in full rage mode. "You guys want some beers?" the man behind the fence asked. "Hell yeah," we said, in unison. "Come on in," he said, opening the backyard fence door. Obviously, we were at a university party. Way too young to be there. We were drunk, high on weed and sugar and adrenaline, and thus didn't care. We mingled, and Ghetto Santas jingled. Everything was just plain old American fun. Drinking beers and flirting with girls way out of our element. That's when there was this dude, long blonde hair, goatee, buff, supersonic smile, who walked out to the backyard and began the interrogation. Asking us what our costumes were supposed to be, he smiled and nodded in approval at our answers. Then he got to Andy. "What are you supposed to be?" he asked. Andy realized he wasn't dressed up and said, stammering, "A homicidal psychopath." The dude laughed. "Ah, I get it. They look just like everyone else, right? They blend into society and all." We all laughed. Dude's girlfriend came out, dressed all skimpy-like, a slutty bride of Frankenstein. "Hey guys," she beamed at us with a smile. We chatted with her for a while, this hot monster bride, wasted as all hell. For some reason or another, she focused on Andy. "You're cute," she said. "Can I hug you?" he asked. "Sure, baby." And that there was the kiss of death. Next thing we know, Andy is being lifted up by the neck and shoved against the fence. The bride was yelling, "Kick his ass, Travis." Yep. We just happened to be at the party hosted by the university wrestling team. It all clicked. The size of these guys. The same shirts they wore. The posters on the walls inside that one could blatantly see through the windows. We messed up well. It was a trap. We were lured in to be taught a lesson. And the bride? Yeah, she probably got off watching the dude beat people to a bloody pulp, be they kids or not. When my friend Tristan the Red Wizard and I managed to rip Andy away from the dude's grip, we heard Dustin drunkenly yelling, dash away all." Brandon the convict had already disembarked from the party. Brian just stood there gaping. Tristan and I were ripping Andy away, and Ghetto Santa was picking up all of our pillowcases of candy and slinging them over his shoulder in a mad drunken frenzy, screaming, "Dash away!" On Ricky and Brandon and Brian and me, on Tristan and Andy, and just go. We barreled down the hill, almost falling with every step. The sounds of a good proper ass kicking billowing from the backyard we just escaped. At the bottom of the hill, Tristan went into a frenzy and started yelling, "No. This isn't right. I'm the great Tristopherson the Red Wizard. I will not back away." A scream of "What did you just say?" was absconded from the backyard, and we just narrowly escaped. "Run," Brandon said, who was already well ahead of us. And we ran. Ran we did. Fortunately, we were close to Brandon and Brian's house. But, unfortunately, we were really close to Brian and Brandon's house. The wrestlers caught up with us, the dude leading the team and all. He said to us, and I'll never forget this, "Any embellishments you can forgive me for, but this dude actually said, 'You punkus sissy little mama boy bitches.'" I got to hand it to him, that was a good one. That checked out. The best insult that was ever dealt. That's when Brian, the oldest, the senior in a crowd of 5 sophomores, approached 6 other lumbering, gigantic college-aged wrestlers and began to quote-unquote chat with them. The rest of us never heard a word that was spoken amidst the whispers, but from 20 feet away, the knifing dude's hand spoke volumes as it shined in the moonlight, showing off its violent dance, slanted at an angle against Brian's neck. Nobody knows what was said. Brian never revealed. Whatever it was, it worked, and the wrestling team returned back off into the darkness. The one time I got anything out of him, Brian said, I simply told them, "You are not going to slit my throat tonight." Basically, Brian saved us that night. None of us ever dressed up again. I, personally, never really celebrated Halloween ever after to such a capacity. And Andy, well, Andy sucks. Halloween at Baldur Manor. "You see him?" Clancy asked Roger, the two of them crouched behind the fence. "Shut up, or he'd gonna hear us," Roger hissed, pressing his eye to the splintery wood. It was after sunset, and if their mothers realized they weren't home yet, the boys would have been in big trouble. They didn't care, though. They wanted to look at this mysterious fella who lived in the creepy old house at the end of the block. The one who only came out after dark. Thomas Baldur was known to almost everyone in Chambliss. It was a small town, a town built on coal and lumber, and the population was rarely over 20,000. As such, the large and foreboding house at the end of Fortner Lane stood out like a sore thumb in a town of mostly trailers and ranch homes. The house in question was Baldur Place, and it loomed like a gargoyle at the end of the cul-de-sac. No one knew how long it had been there, but some of the kids had seen a picture of the manor in old paintings from the early days of the town. They say it had been occupied by the town's founder, and when he'd been arrested after a string of children had gone missing, someone new had taken up residence there. Someone who only came out after dark. The mob hadn't waited for justice to be served, it was said. They had dragged Thomas from his cell and beheaded him in the street, something that was the custom in certain places. Afterward, the townspeople had wanted to go and see what sort of things the town's founder had in his now empty home. But when the lights kept coming on and a strange figure was seen around the grounds, they thought the magnificent manor might be haunted. They assumed it would eventually fall to pieces without someone to take care of it, but instead, the house remained and even seemed to thrive under the care of whoever owned it. People had seen a shadowy figure making changes to the house for years, maintaining the grounds and fixing the damage to the ancient three-story, but no one had ever met him. That was 100 years ago, and as the town grew up, the house remained as a mystery within Chambliss. No one in town still believed the house was haunted, but they knew someone was living there. Whoever they were extremely reclusive. When people came to the house, no one ever answered the door. If you approached the person while they were in the yard, they always retreated inside. No one knew who they were or what relation they might be to the old founder, but they did know one thing about the owner of the house, and that was that he loved Halloween. The owner of the house may not be social the other 364 days of the year, but on Halloween, they threw the gates open and passed out the choicest candy and the best tricks. As the boys watched, the yard was already being prepared for the coming holiday. The front porch was festooned with pumpkins, the yard was set with gravestones and half-buried caskets, and the cobwebs and bats were thick in every tree. The trees in the yard always looked skeletal, despite how much attention was paid to the lawn, and they added to the aesthetic of the house. No one could be sure, but everyone was pretty sure that the creepy nature of the homestead was intentional. The wood was dark, painted a deep brown, and stained like dark chocolate. The windows always glowed with something like candlelight, and the house just seemed to lean malevolently. Beyond those gates, it was Halloween every day for whoever lived there. "What's he doing?" Clancy asked. The crack he was peeking through wasn't very wide, and Roger had the better vantage point with his knothole. "He's filling orange bags with leaves for yard jack-o'-lanterns." "How does he see?" Clancy asked, the scritch-scratch of the man's rake constant as he collected up his medium. "Dunno. He doesn't even have the porch light on. Maybe he's raking by pumpkin light?" Clancy wanted to look up over the fence, but he didn't dare. Both boys assumed the man would just leave if he thought they were watching, but you could never be sure. When Clancy's mother called his name, the boy stiffened like a goose had walked over his grave. They could see the person in the yard stiffen too, looking in the direction of the call as he turned to the fence. In the gathering shadows, they could see that he was dressed in jeans and a sweater, clothes that would look as acceptable for yard work as they would on a homeless man. The garments hung off him, his body thin and emaciated, and people in town thought he might be sick. His voice, however, did not match his appearance. The voice everyone heard when they did business with him was rich, cultured, and full of vigor. Many of the women secretly held affection for him, saying his voice sounded like one of the men from the romance novel covers they all read while their husbands were at work. They would have to imagine what his face might look like though, because he never came into town. He would call the local businesses and tell them he needed supplies delivered to the house about twice a year. Wood, decorations, candy, various and sundry things that he used to fix up the house or get ready for the holidays. He never called the grocer or the butcher, however, and people weren't sure what he was eating up there. Whatever it was, it kept him going, and he continued to tirelessly work on the house and the grounds by moonlight. "Roger?" came the shrill cry from farther down the block. "Roger. It's past curfew, boy. You'd better get home before your dinner gets cold." "Crap," Roger said, taking his eyes off the yard as he turned back towards home. "She sounds mad." "We better go," Clancy whispered, feeling very exposed in the pool of illumination from the street light. "Yeah, might be. Are you boys quite all right?" said a cultured voice from behind them. Both boys jumped like someone had lashed them with a belt. They looked back, shaking as the shadow of the stranger fell across them. In the gloom of the yard, he had appeared to be a large, thin man, but now he loomed over the boys like a giant from a fable. Both had barely gotten a good look at the stranger before the lamp overhead popped and left them standing in the gathering darkness. Both yelled in terror, scrambling away from the fence as they beat feet up the street for home, as startled by the lamp as the man. He watched them go, his face obscured by the gloom except for his eyes. Both boys would swear later that they had seen two red flickers where his eyes should be. Both boys would also swear that his head had been a grinning skull until the day they died. It was probably just a mask, Roger, Clancy said as they walked to school the next day. He could still feel the sting his dad had put in his bottom for being out past dark, and his mother had scolded him for bothering the nice man who lived at Baldu Place. He's never hurt anyone, and he'll never feel like he can introduce himself to the neighborhood if you kids keep bothering him. She had colored a little as she said it, and some of the snap in his father's hand could have been because he'd noticed. Many of the men in the town were hoping that the mysterious man would stay in his house and leave their wives to their daydreams. "Mask nothing," Roger said. "That was a skull with two red eyes. You and I both saw it." "I dunno," Clancy hedged, not wanting another whipping from his dad for bothering people. His dad had been passed up for another promotion at the paper mill, and he was ornery these days. His mother had tried to console him, saying he would get it next time, but he'd been sitting in the den with a case of beer and a foul mood lately. "What I know is that someone with a skeleton head is living in our town, and we should let people know about it." "Yeah?" Clancy said, skeptically, "and how are we gonna do that? Mr. Baldu never comes out or lets people see him, so how are we going to do anything? Just so happens that we don't need him to come out. In 2 nights, Mr. Baldu will open his gates and let kids into trick or treat. He always has a spooky display where he hides so he can give people a good scare. If we can get close, we can snap a picture and get proof. You still got that instant camera?" Clancy nodded hesitantly. "Yeah, but if I break it running away, my mom will literally kill me." "It was a Christmas present, and we won't break it." Roger assured him, "Once we get proof, we'll be heroes. Imagine how cool we'll be if we snap a picture of the ghost that haunts Baldu Place." Clancy thought about it, and as he thought of the kids at school chanting his name, he decided that it might be worth the risk. He and Roger would be legends, and a reputation like that could take them all the way through middle school. "What's your costume this year?" Roger asked, though it sounded like it didn't matter. "I've got a cardboard box robot that I made last year," Clancy said. His dad had helped him make it last year, back when he was in a better mood, and Clancy had added a little more spray paint the following weekend. That had earned him a loud scolding from his dad too. Apparently, he had used the good spray paint and not the cheap shit he had bought for him last year. Clancy had said he was sorry and finished up with the other cans. It looked good now, and the thought that he might not get to wear it made him feel a little sad. It would surely be too small next year. "I've got another ninja costume that my grandma gave me for my birthday this year. Mom bought me a new one without thinking about it, and if we go as ninjas, we can make a hasty retreat once we get the picture." The logic was sound to Clancy. Ninjas would be faster than a clunky box robot, and he agreed to meet at Roger's house on Friday night. "Bring your camera and don't be late. I want to hit some houses before we go to get the big prize." It was edging up at 9 o'clock when the boys got to the gates of Baldu Place. A few houses had turned into a 3-hour tour of 6 different neighborhoods, and when Roger realized what time it was, he had said a word that would have made Clancy's mom wash his mouth out with soap. The boys had run back to the neighborhood and left their candy at Roger's house before heading out again. Roger's mother had asked if they didn't have enough candy, but Roger said they had one more house to hit before they packed it in. We have to get candy from the Baldo house. They have the best treats in town. She had told them to be quick, and the two ninjas had headed back into the night. Now that they were standing here before the lair of the beast, Clancy was feeling a little unsure of the plan. "Let's just go back, Roger," Clancy begged. "We have enough candy and we don't really need to." But Roger stepped into the yard like he hadn't even heard him. Roger intended to get his treat this year. Clancy was left with no choice but to turn around or follow after, and his loyalty to his friend was too great to back down now. The yard was set up like a graveyard, and as they walked towards the house, Clancy jumped as a zombie lurched out of the coffin that had been set up. It growled and roared before descending back down again as it got ready for its next victim. Roger laughed as the kid in the ghost costume jumped in time with Clancy, glancing around to make sure he was the last before proceeding. It was late now, and the boys were the last two left on the property. If they were going to make their move, now would be the time. They made their way up the walkway, graves erupting to reveal zombies or skeletons that popped out with a mechanical growling noise. He had really gone all out this year, it seemed, and the boys expected a grave to contain the mysterious Mr. Baldo at any minute. He would come stomping out, dressed as a skeleton or a zombie, and they could trick him into bending down so they could snatch his mask and reveal his face. Clancy was ready with his camera, and Roger had seen him snap several panic shots as they went. The closer they got to the house without encountering him, the more their nerves jangled. With every crackly mechanical growl and yowl that split the air, the boys' trepidation rose, and as they mounted the stairs to the house, they felt a cold chill run up their backs. They had come midway when the door to the house opened up, revealing a rocking chair with a headless body seated in it. It held a bucket of candy on its lap, the chair creaking menacingly with every sway of the occupant. "Get the camera ready," Roger whispered, sneaking up to the chair. Clancy nodded, standing just inside the door as he tried to stop his knees from shaking. Roger came up to the bowl, his eyes boring into the headless thing as he reached into the mound of candy. He expected the jump, expected the scare, but he never expected the direction it might come from. Clancy watched through the little window, hands shaking, as he waited to snap the picture. All at once, Roger shot his free hand for where the head should be on the rocker, trying to find its head. It should be right below the neckline, an easy grab. But as Roger patted the spot and found it solid, he cried out in pain as something took hold of his rooting hand. He had been so intent on the shoulders, he hadn't bothered to take his hand from the candy bowl. Now, something had a hold of it, and Roger was afraid it would tear it off. "Clancy! Clancy, help me!" he yelled, but the door slammed shut then, sealing their fate. As the man stood up, Roger pulled his hand free of the bowl, and Clancy screamed in terror as the bloody skull chomped happily at it. It was an old skull, the bones red with blood, and the teeth were turning red as Roger's finger was ground beneath them. Roger shook it only once, the pain too great to have it move much, and when the meaty snap washed over the boys, the skull hit the ground with nearly half the finger still in its mouth. Roger fled, pounding on the door as Clancy sputtered and cried for someone to help them. His camera flashed a few more times, but what it caught was anyone's guess. When the body bent down to get the head, tucking it under its arm, the skull seemed to shut as it worried down the finger into its non-existent throat. "Terribly sorry, boys. I know it's bad manners and a touch barbaric, but Bloody Bones here does love his treats on Halloween. I've had to limit him, missing children do make such a fuss, but," the skull said as its bones turned up abnormally, "Halloween is such a hectic time. Sometimes children go missing for one reason or another." The boys cowered as he came towards them, but their screams fell on deaf ears as Blood Bones and Rawhead went about their business. The boys were searched for, but never found. The police came and searched Baldu Place, but they never found the boys or its mysterious owner. Baldu Place continues to stand to this day, and every Halloween there is a grand event with candy and decorations. Supplies are still delivered, the bills are always paid, and children sometimes go missing. No one could know that when the townspeople beheaded Thomas Baldu, they would create a legacy that would outlast even the town. None of them could know what they would create with the swing of that simple axe, or how it would haunt the town forevermore. Dr. Winter's Forgetfulness Clinic Halloween Memories. Trick or treat. The screams of happy children enveloped the two as they walked up the sidewalk of Kashmir's Main Street. Dr. Winter, her costume making her look a little like a noblewoman from an episode of Game of Thrones, walked arm in arm with Marguerite as the two took in the sights of Kashmir. The main street was lined with pumpkins and streamers, skeletons and ghouls, and the smells of kettle corn and candy apples were everywhere. Swarms of children ran to and fro as they went between the storefronts, and Winter smiled as the owners filled their bags with treats. The owners of the hardware store, dressed as Fred and Barney, were handing out full-sized candy bars, and Gladys Johns of the Animal Rescue had a very intricate dog costume she was capering about in as she handed out Scooby snacks she had baked herself. Everyone they passed had a wave of a kind word for the pair, and as Maggie turned her head in surprise, a pumpkin burst open to reveal a grinning skeleton within. Winter felt this was one of her favorite Halloweens in Kashmir. "This is so fantastic," Maggie gushed. "And they do this every year?" "They do," Winter said. "Do they not have Halloween where you're from?" Maggie shook her head. "In the cities, perhaps, but we did not go there. Mother said it would be too dangerous. We often stayed in the forest where it was safe, where others could be safe from us." Winter frowned. "That must have been hard." "It was, but I do not regret leaving that life behind. The cities are not so dangerous, and I have you by my side to explain these strange things to me. Winter smiled. "Of course, I'll gladly be your tour guide for Kashmir's Halloween Spectacular." They came to the general store, and Winter turned as she heard her name. Angela came up waving, losing straw from her scarecrow costume, and smiled hugely at the pair. "It's good to see you taking some time off work, Pam." Winter smiled as she cast her hands up to indicate everything. "Halloween comes but once a year. Would that it happened more often." Angela said, "Otto is around here somewhere, too. He, Marcus, and I all dressed as scarecrows this year. We got some really cute pictures before we left. I'll email them to you." Pamela nodded, but it was hard to ignore how Angela's eyes kept darting around as she spoke. She knew who she was looking for, and it worried her to see her friend like this. Angela would likely be back in the clinic within a week, and Winter really needed to find a solution to her problem. Perhaps if Marcus could give her another baby, but more children likely weren't the answer here. "You okay, Pam?" Angela asked, suddenly snapping back. "You look like something on your mind." Pamela shook her head, waving her friend off as she fixed her face. "It's nothing, Angie. I think I see Marcus over there looking for you." Angela turned, seeing a pair of scarecrows and waving at them. "I better go. Otto is ravenous for treats this year." "Happy Halloween, Pam, and you too, Maggie," she added, rushing off towards the shops further down. Humans are so very strange, Maggie half whispered. You can say that again, Winter said, bumping her with her hip as the two continued down the block. Winter saw a small crowd around the clinic as they got closer, and when she came to her own storefront, she had to stifle a laugh at the sight of Juliet. Juliet, whatever are you wearing? Marguerite asked, not bothering to hide her laugh. Juliet looked like a nurse who'd been caught in a thresher, and Winter was certain she couldn't be comfortable with all that skin showing. Reverend Dalby, who was at the end of the street with the ladies' auxiliary, would likely have had something to say about it, but he would have been in the minority. As Juliet did a little turn for her, Winter was fairly sure that the men who had come by to inspect their candy bucket had come looking for dresses. I'm a zombie nurse, of course, Juliet said, grinning. It's been a big hit, Doc. I've passed out more than a few business cards to interested clients. That's fantastic, Winter said, though she shuddered to think what sort of clients they would have to run out of the lobby for the next few weeks. Are you two heading to the park? Juliet asked. They say that Charlie is playing a free concert there before the fireworks. Oh, Maggie crooned. I would like to see that. He is very talented and so very handsome. Now, Maggie, Winter said with a little wink, don't make me jealous. What? The dark-haired woman said, feigning a pout, who doesn't like a bit of window shopping. Juliet shook her head. Well, if you're gonna make it, you better hurry. I'm pretty sure he starts in less than an hour. Winter bid her a good night, and the two started making their way towards Calico Park. Along the way, however, they became distracted by something else. Something that should not have been there. Come one, come all. The man in the top hat proclaimed, enjoy an authentic Halloween fright. Marguerite turned as she heard the barker, and Winter stopped to look at the shabby haunted house that he was standing in front of. The whole thing looked very cheap. The alley between the cell phone store and the flower shop was taken up by a large paper-mache pumpkin, its mouth grinning openly as it invited people inside. Paper bats and ghosts hung on strings around the outside, and guests walked into the belching cloud of a fog machine as they went in. It was all capped off by a sign that promised a refund if the buyer wasn't satisfied, and Winter noticed more than one person coming out with a familiar look. It was terror and deep fear, but also acceptance, perhaps even closure. Winter, however, was more curious about the man running the show. She knew everyone in town, everyone, but this man was a stranger. He was dressed somewhere between a ringmaster and an undertaker, and as they locked eyes she sensed something not quite right. The man wasn't just a stranger to the town, he was a stranger to this world. Maggie was already walking in that direction, and Winter allowed herself to be led. Good evening, ladies. Would you care to take a trip through my house of horrors? Maggie looked at the entrance with some barely contained derision. Is it very scary? I cannot speak to the quality of the scares, my dear, but it is life-changing and a one-of-a-kind experience. How much? Winter asked, not impressed. Just $5 each, and, of course, you will be given a full refund if not completely satisfied. Winter reached into her purse and dropped a 10 in, the two of them heading for the entrance. What's wrong, love? Maggie asked. You seem tense. I don't know, Winter said, the hair on her neck lifting now that the man was behind them. Did he seem odd to you? Most humans seem a little odd to me. I am not a good judge of this. They walked between the lips of the giant pumpkin, and as the smoke enveloped them, Winter coughed as it settled around her. It smelled familiar, brimstone and hellfire, and as Maggie disappeared from her arm, Winter grabbed for her desperately. She turned, but her love was already gone, and Winter spun in the dark place as she searched for her. Marguerite? Maggie. She turned frantically, her eyes not finding her, but she did see something in the gloom, something that confused her. It was her desk, the one from the clinic she had sat behind so many times before, and on it was a steaming mug of what she assumed was tea. It sat placidly, the steam rising and dancing as she approached, and as her hands wrapped around the cup, she saw the tea inside beginning to churn and ripple. The cup shook, shaking Winter's whole arm, and as she dropped it, it burst as 100,000 memories spiraled out from the spreading liquid. The bulbous little balls that she collected from her clients, each of them a rainbow of colors, began to fill the space, and as Winter stepped away, she heard a tittering little voice like bugs on her skin. So many memories, Doctor. Is it because you're afraid to analyze your own? What lies within Dr. Pamela Winters that makes her so afraid to look there? What makes you seek out others so you don't have to? She reached behind her, her hand darting like a serpent, and as she caught the barker by the throat, his hateful words were cut off. I don't know who you serve, you little imp, but you would do well not to torment me. Do you want to see what lies inside my head? Very well, have a look. Winter took a deep breath, retching only a little as she brought up a pulsating red something that bristled with barely contained energy. The barker struggled, his face turning different colors as she held him up, and as he took one big breath of air, she pushed the squirming fruit into his mouth until he took a bite. His eyes grew wide, his form trembling as her memories ran down his chin. She knew what he was seeing, but clearly it was not what he expected. He had expected her to be a talented charlatan, perhaps even a true practitioner of the arts, but as he gazed upon the smoking pit she had once inhabited, he knew she was beyond whatever small magic he possessed. She didn't know what he was, a spirit or some kind of magical creature, but she knew that he was nothing next to her, and she would not suffer this disrespect in her town. She would not be made of a fool in her own territory by one such as this. Snatching it back, Winter wolfed the memory down before it could overpower him, not wanting to ruin him, only to teach. He stammered, his calm and confident facade suddenly dissipating. I had no idea who I was dealing with. Please, forgive me. Pack your little horror show up and get out of my town. If I ever see you again, you'll be lucky to end up in one of my glass bottles. He took his leave in a puff of smoke, leaving Winter alone in the alley she and Maggie had walked into only moments before. She heard a whimper and turned to her left, her heart skipping a beat. Marguerite was crumpled on the concrete, sobbing like a child as Winter knelt to help her. Maggie? Mags, it's okay. She cried into her arms. I was back in the woods again. I was being hunted by the men with the crosses and my mother. It's over now, Maggie. Just a little parlor trick. He's gone now. She held her, letting her get it all out as the music began to tune up in the nearby park. Come on, Winter said, let's go hear what Charlie Guthrie has written for the occasion and forget all about this. She looked up into Winter's eyes, her lips turning up as she took her hand. I would like that very much.